Okay, boomers, I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you today. I don't know when I'll be back. I'll try to let you guys know as soon as I can. But anyways, here's what I want you to do. We're going to go through this here together. I want to kind of take time to go over this chapter 10, section 3 reading guide. I'm going to go through it quickly because I only have 15 minutes and I like to talk. So I'll try to go through the book pages here and try to answer these questions one at a time. So you should have already done the if you were there. All right, this first part is going to be about who attacked Rome at around 387 BC. Okay, and that's going to be the people of Gaul. Okay, the people of Gaul right here. They attack Rome, and then what does Rome do to deal with it? They actually pay the Gaul people to leave. Okay, which is stupid. It's a stupid thing to do, and we're going to talk about it here for number two. Because why did many of Rome's neighbors then attack Rome after Gaul? Well, because they saw what Gaul did, and they saw how they got treated. Okay, the people around Italy are kind of like, hey, if you're going to attack Rome and actually take over Rome, Romans are just going to pay you to leave. So they're kind of like, hey, we'll just go there and we'll get paid. And so they start attacking Rome, some of the outsiders. So if I look at this map here, okay, you got to imagine in this purple area, a bunch of different tribes of people. They start attacking Rome, figuring, hey, they'll just pay us off like the Gauls. So it was a really bad decision by the Romans. So the Romans had to change what they were doing, their policy. Okay, and that's where they had to come up with an army to defend themselves against these attacks. They weren't going to be able to pay everybody off. And that's where they come up with their Roman legion. Now, a legion is just a group of up to about 6,000 Roman soldiers. And then how were they set up? They were set up then into divisions, or what they're called centuries. Okay, and this is where we get, like, a century is 100 years. We get it from the Romans. This here, their centuries were 100 soldiers. And it's much like our military today. It allowed for the Roman legions to fight many different attacks on the battlefield, and they could move quickly from place to place. It was a really good thing. All right, so it allows them to defeat many of their enemies. Now, what happens is for about the first 200 years of the Republic, they're fighting wars or fighting battles along the Italian peninsula here. And then you can see by 270 BC, really Rome has conquered all of the Italian peninsula. Now, what happens to all of the people that had lived in these areas here that are in the purple? Well, a lot of these people, they don't stay in that area. They actually come to the city of Rome. What happens to the farmland here, and I'm kind of in this part right here for number 4, is that the wealthy patricians of Rome, they actually take over this land. The patricians aren't going to live on the land out here in Italy, but they're going to own that land and they're going to get the riches from it. And then they have slaves that work the land, unfortunately. Now, these farmers and their families, they're all going to flock to Rome, looking for jobs in Rome, looking for different lifestyle, things like that. And what it leads to is Rome becomes very overcrowded way too quickly. Rome has to expand their trade then, because these farm fields around Italy can't provide the food necessary for all these people living in Rome now. So the Romans now have to look to trade with foreigners during this time period. Because of too many people in Rome, not enough farm produce being created, they had to look to other places around the Mediterranean Sea, so trade with foreigners, to provide food for all those people in Rome. And it leads to good things. That's how Rome's going to prosper, through trade. Trade is a good thing. All right, so now we have this here. Rome's going to grow beyond just Italy. Okay, so here it was in 270 BC, but now Rome is going to see a threat over here in the Mediterranean Sea called Carthage. And it's going to lead to a series of wars called the Punic Wars. So this right here, the Punic Wars, is basically just a series of wars between Rome and Carthage. They went to war 3 different times between 264 and 146 BC. And these wars were pretty violent. Okay, Carthage is going to send armies into Italy. Romans are going to send armies into Carthage, and it really becomes a bitter fight, and it's a horrible war. Now, there is one famous Carthaginian general named Hannibal that becomes famous through the Punic Wars. Now, who was Hannibal? He was a Carthaginian general who, if we look here on this page, in about 218 BC, he's going to lead his army of soldiers and elephants over the Alps mountains, as you can see here, and down into Italy. And he threatens Rome. He threatens to capture Rome. And he almost does capture Rome. However, Rome is going to send an army, as you can see this blue line, into northern Africa where Carthage is at. And it forces Hannibal to leave Italy to come defend Carthage. And that's how they actually get Hannibal out of Italy. Eventually what happens, there's a big battle at Zama in 202 BC, and Hannibal and the Carthaginians are defeated. Now, the last of the series of wars will occur in the 140s BC, and this will be where Roman senators, they look across the Mediterranean, they see Carthage rising again, ready to threaten their trade and things like that. So some of the wealthy senators, they're going to convince the Roman Senate to send an army, or convince the consuls actually, to send an army to Carthage and finally defeat the Carthaginians. They go there. The Romans have a victory. They burn the city. They kill most of the people, and they'll sell those that are alive into slavery. There are some reports that they even went there and threw salt all across the land so that nothing could grow there for decades and decades. All right, so that's kind of how they treated the Carthaginians. And the reason why we talk about how they treated the Carthaginians is that because after the Punic Wars are over, Rome is going to continue to expand. They're going to go conquer new lands. And one of the places they're going to conquer is they're going to conquer Greece. And we can take a look at how they treated the Greeks after their victory with Greece, is that really they didn't treat the Greeks any too much differently. They treated them quite kindly. They even will accept many of their traditions and cultures into their own life. The Romans will adopt their literature and their art, philosophy, religion, and education. Especially the religion. I mean, Greek gods and Roman gods are the same, just different names. So we get to see the Romans will treat Greece much differently, mainly because the Greeks really didn't fight back. I mean, they had horrible wars against the Carthaginians, so once that was over, they were pretty ticked off with the Carthaginians and treated them that way. But the Greeks, they weren't as upset with the Greeks, and so that's why they were treated differently. All right, so now we move away from the Romans conquering the Greeks and conquering foreign lands, and we're going to take a look at some problems that were going on in Rome themselves, in the, this area right here, especially in the purple. All right, now all of this right here, by 100 BC, you can see all this new land that has been added to Rome. The Roman Republic at that time, but really the Republic was losing its steam. And that's where we're going to talk about Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. Now, these two were brothers, but they were tribunes within the Roman assembly. They were there to protect the interests of the poor people, or the plebeians. Now, Tiberius was killed because he wanted to give farmland to the poor people of Rome. He wanted to take land that the wealthy had, and he wanted to split that land up and give it to the poor people. Well, that didn't settle well with the patricians, so what did they do? They had Tiberius clubbed to death. And then Gaius, his brother, is going to become a tribune. Well, Gaius doesn't fare too much better. He wants to sell food cheaply to poor citizens of Rome. He wants to be able to feed them and things like that. Once again, this is going to anger many of the wealthy because they're the ones that are trying to make money off of all of this. And they are going to have Gaius killed also. He's beheaded, and then his head's filled with like molten lead, and then it's hung in the forum as an example to the people on what happens if they mess with the wealthy. And that leads us to number 13, is how did the killings of the Gracchus brothers change politics in Rome? Is that no longer is it about discussing the ideas and trying to debate the issues and get people to change their minds. It's now fear and violence. That's how things are running in Rome. The violent deaths of the Gracchus brothers changed politics. From that time on, people see violence as a political weapon. No longer do we discuss our ideas and debate. It's now, I will kill you. I will use violence, fear, intimidation to get my way. And that's scary because it actually worked. All right, and that brings us to these last three questions. Marius and Sulla. Okay, so what does Gaius Marius encourage poor people to do? Well, Gaius Marius is a general in the Roman army and a consul, and he's going to encourage poor Romans to join the army. Before, you had to own property to be in the army, but Gaius is going to change that, and he's going to allow unemployed citizens to join Rome. And what that change means for Rome is that no longer are people loyal to Rome that serve in the army, they're now loyal to the general. And in this case here, Gaius Marius. It gives Marius so much power in Rome because he now has an army that will support him. And he uses it And as an example, then other politicians or other elected officials are going to try to create their own armies also, and that leads us to Lucius Cornelius Sulla. So after Gaius Marius, Lucius Sulla is going to see the power that Marius gets from creating his own army, that Lucius Cornelius Sulla is going to do the same thing. He became consul in 88 BC. Now he's going to quickly come into conflict with Marius because he sees that the Roman army, or his army, is still loyal to Marius. And Sulla is going to create his own army also. And a war is going to break out between the two. A civil war. They're fighting for control, for power in Rome. Eventually, Sulla wins this war. And then he's going to claim himself as dictator for life, not 6 months like Cincinnatus. And then he's going to use his power as dictator to basically crush his enemies. It's a very scary time in Rome. The Roman Republic is basically crumbling. And Marius and Sulla are two examples of this. And then that leads us to this end thing here with Spartacus. Okay, who was Spartacus? Spartacus was a former gladiator of Rome. And what did he lead? He led a slave rebellion. He led thousands of slaves in a rebellion. A lot of times slaves became gladiators. And yes, it was just like what you might think from movies. Slaves fight other slaves to the death. They might fight exotic animals to the death, like lions and bears, things like that. Spartacus is going to lead a rebellion throughout Rome. His followers, they're actually going to defeat an army that is sent to stop them. And they're going to terrorize different peoples throughout southern Italy. Now, eventually, Spartacus is killed in a battle. Spartacus is killed. Now, this rebellion ends, but Rome is not happy with it just ending with Spartacus's death. So what happens is the Romans are going to round up 6,000 other rebellious slaves and use them as an example. And they're going to have those 6,000 rebellious slaves killed. They're going to be crucified, so they're going to be hanged from a cross, nailed to a cross, and then they're going to be lined up on the roads throughout Italy, just as an example to what happens if you rebel against Rome. And it's really, we are seeing the downfall of the Roman Republic at this time. Spartacus's rebellion is roughly around, 76 BC. We're getting very close to the end of the Republic. The end of the Republic will officially occur with Julius Caesar coming in 44 BC, but that's actually our next chapter. So pause this video. Hopefully you got a chance to write down anything you needed to make changes and things like that with this document here. Hopefully you're able to do the other things in here, this chapter 10 vocabulary quiz. You can certainly use your book, use your notes, things like that for this quiz. And then the last thing I want you doing today, so I want you doing these in order. Your bell ringer should be done. I want you watching this video, then the chapter 10 vocabulary. And if you still have time, I put a little interesting video on here called Horrible Histories. It's actually something my son and daughter and I got into watching during our e-learning last spring. And it's a 16-minute video, but I think you'll find it interesting. It's quite hilarious, but a lot of what they are talking about is true. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. I'll try to get back as soon as possible. If you have any questions, please email me. I'm just, like I said, I'm just sitting here at home bored, waiting to see what happens. So hopefully you guys are doing okay. Have a great day, and I'll see you as soon as I can.